Welcome to Pick Up and Deliver, the podcast where I pick up my audio recorder as I head out for a walk and deliver an episode to you while I stroll around. I'm Brendan Riley. Well, good morning, friends. It is a gloomy Saturday here in suburban Chicago, and you're getting a couple weekend episodes of Pick Up and Deliver. It was a busy week, and I had a lot of errands to run on Wednesday and Thursday, so I did not get out for a walk on Wednesday or Thursday to record episodes. And Friday, I was ready to go for a walk. I had my notes ready, and it was 38 degrees and a sort of crummy, drizzly rain all day. 3 different times, I'm like, okay, now I'm going to go for my walk. I look out, crummy, drizzly rain. I'm like, I love my listeners, but I'm not going to go walk around for an hour in the crummy, drizzly rain so that they can have a podcast that's hard to hear because of the crummy, drizzly rain. Or in which I'm literally getting soaked because I'm not using an umbrella so that I can maintain the sound quality, at least as so far as you could call this podcast sound quality for my listeners. So, too bad for you. There you go. That said, it's Saturday morning and I'm out for a stroll now. I'm going to record a couple episodes. I'm on my way up to the hardware store in the library, and then on my way back, I'll record another episode. What do you think of them apples? Sounds good? I thought so. So the first episode is, as is often the case when I have a bunch of games played that I haven't talked about yet, a shooting from the hip triple shot. Shooting from the hip triple shot is an episode in which I talk about 3 different games that I played for the first time recently and what I thought of them. I have also occasionally been sprinkling in a flashback to another game that I played recently that I got out of the dust, because I think it's fun to talk about games out of the dust. So we'll see. I'll leave it as a surprise about whether or not I introduce an out of the dust game to our conversation today. Will I do it? Who knows? Actually, I don't know either. We'll see how it goes. But first I want to talk about some games I have played. This first game is a game that I feel like a lot of people talked about when it came out because it sounded neat, and then not many people talked about it after very long, in part because it turns out it sounded neater than it was, and that is The World of Yoho. The World of Yoho is a game from the company Yellow, which weirdly, for a game published this recently, 2016, does not have a credited designer. How strange. Which maybe speaks to why it's not any good. Sorry to say, it's not any good. It's a neat concept. The World of Yoho, it is a pirate-themed game. You have a pirate ship, and on it you have your pirate ship that is sailing around and interacting with other things on the board. Here's the trick. You're all using your phones as the playing piece for the game. And that's kind of neat because what happens is you have the app installed on your phone, and then you put the phone on the board and you can see your little pirate ship there, and it's animated. It's a little animated sprite. And then when you take your turn, stuff happens on the board. And instead of like drawing a card or following a set of rules that happen when you get close enough to engage an opponent, all of that is handled by the app. So that if you get close enough to an opponent, then you and your opponent start shooting at each other. Or if you pass into a certain space, a sea monster pops up and attacks you, etc., etc. That's a neat concept. And it works for the most part. There is a little bit of fiddliness where if you move the phone in the wrong way, it thinks you didn't move it, or it thinks you moved it in the wrong direction. And if you don't notice that right away and move a second time, you can't back up 2 steps. The game won't let you. So you have to correct the movement thing as soon as you make the mistake, which it took us a little while to figure out. But the reality is that while the app works smoothly, the gameplay ends up being really slow. So you have a lot of downtime between turns. And then when it is your turn, you often don't get to do anything. You get like, I think 3 actions per turn, maybe. And a lot of it is sailing around. At its heart, it's a pick up and deliver game. So you spend a lot of time sailing around. So it's not uncommon to have 2 or even all 3 of your actions just be sailing actions, in which case you sail from one place to another and literally don't do anything. Now, if that's the whole game, if everyone was doing that, the turns would proceed at quite a clip. But at least half the time, you have a turn where you do something else, which then takes significantly longer. And as a result, you and your opponents, sometimes your opponents have to wait a while. So if you have 2 or 3 turns in a row where you're just moving and other people are interacting and doing stuff, it gets really dull. So World of Yoho was an amusing experiment. I'd say it's worth checking out if you're at a con and they have a copy in the library, but I would not buy it. And I'm not even sure it's worth playing. It really was not very fun. But I'm glad to have tried it because I love trying new games, even ones that aren't fun. That was World of Yoho from Yellow, designer unknown. The next game is a game I've been very excited about for a long time, and I was really happy to play it. My only regret is that it's too long, and this is My Father's Work. My Father's Work is a new game from Renegade Game Studios, published last year on Kickstarter, and it is a Kickstarter and con or direct sale exclusive because it's too expensive to sell in retail, which is kind of an interesting model. It's got very nice components, and it's really fun, I thought. My Father's Work is a worker placement game. You have a number of workers who are being placed around on the board, and you're using them in a variety of ways. The premise is that you are the children of a mad scientist in the line of a Holly Griffin from Invisible Man, or a Victor Frankenstein from Frankenstein, and you are continuing the tradition started by your mad scientist parent to investigate mysteries, and you have a ultimate goal that you're trying to achieve, like immortality or time travel or something, and you are working toward that by conducting different experiments. What's neat about the game is that the village that your castle resides in has people living in it who are interacting with your family, and as your family conducts experiments, you become to them more or less creepy, and that influences how the people see you. You also become more or less mad, and that influences how you interact. Now, there are 3 things about the game that I thought were really neat. One, the game is played over 9 rounds, and after 3 rounds, each round represents roughly a third of your adult life. So you start the game in your early 20s, having already married, and taking on your quarter of the family estate if you're playing 4 players. Then the first round represents, say, your 20s to your 40s, the second round your 40s to your 60s, and the third round your 60s to your 80s, and then you die. Or maybe 20 to 30, 30 to 40, 40 to 50, and then you die. Because the whole thing is, the next round starts when your children have just gotten into their 20s and are taking over the estate after you have died. So there's an interesting thinking about the evolution of the timeline that's a little odd. But the whole idea is that in the second round, you play your children. So the 3 things that I like about the game: 1, the village changes as you go along. Each round you make decisions that influence where the village is going, and as a result, influence the experience you have. And there's a big book of villages. It's a spiral-bound book. And this is the map that you're placing your workers on, and you change pages depending on which choices you've made. So there's a sort of choice tree that's pretty interesting. 2, the game comes with 6 figures for each player, and the 6 figures are all designed to look slightly different, and there's a mix of male and female and non-binary figures, or figures that don't clearly identify one way or another. And as a player, you get these little rings, 6 little rings, that indicate what type of worker the figure is. There's one that's you, there's one that's your spouse, there's 2 that are caretakers, and 2 that are servants. And what's neat is, you get to decide which of the 6 figures has which base on it. So if you decide you want the person with the top hat to be the spouse, you can do that. If you want the person holding the flask to be the caretaker, you can do that. If you want so you can decide. It's nice because not only does it let you kind of identify with the figure you are interested in the most, you can also build the families you want as well, and employees. So that's really neat. The third thing I really like about the game is the way that it integrates the experience you've had into the next generation. It does this through this mechanism where, I can't remember what they're called, but you have these cards. They're kind of like obsessions. That's not the word, but let's say they're obsessions. As you get more crazy, you gain these obsessions, which are things that you absolutely have to do. And if you resolve them before the end of your generation, then your children are fine. But if you don't resolve them, they become unresolved issues, and they become inherited problems that your children get from you. It's sort of like the results of your bad parenting. And then in your next generation, your character is hampered by these maladjustments that you've inherited from your parent. It's a really neat mechanism that adds a lot of flavor, and it's really fun. Now, it is a little random too. Some of them are worse than others. Some of them can really hamper what you're trying to do. So you have to kind of let the story shape the experience a little bit, but it's a really neat mechanism. The one downside of the game is it takes a long time. Our play took 5.5 hours, but after we finished the first round, we realized we were playing like the first generation. So we played 3 rounds. We figured out we were playing dramatically wrong. And so we started the game over. So our 5.5 hour play really should have been about 4 hours, but still 4 hours is a long time. Makes the game kind of a commitment. Nonetheless, we had a really good time playing it, and I'm looking forward to playing it again. The pieces that the game comes with are really, really nice. Metal coins and plastic pieces, and there's these chemicals that you can get in the game that are these tiny, represented by these tiny little jars with little cork stoppers. The one thing I'm kind of disappointed in, the game doesn't actually have a mechanical purpose to putting things in the jars. They're literally just a prop. So that part, I mean, it was neat, but a little unnecessary. Nonetheless, I'm not complaining. It's beautiful and it's really fun to play. So, My Father's Work, I had a really good time with it. My flashback game, I mentioned this a little bit in the top of the stack, that I had played Out of the Dust, The Castles of Mad King Ludwig. This ended up being a game I'd returned to after quite a while. It had been a long time since I played it, and I was really happy with the way the game plays. I hadn't really tangled with it in a while, and I forgot how much fun it is to pick out these weird shaped rooms and to try to get the bonuses based on them, and trying to figure out how much to charge things so people will buy rooms from you, but not buy the room that you want. The theme is a really fun theme, even though some of the stuff I've read suggests maybe it's not nice to call him Mad King Ludwig, that maybe he was called Mad because he was gay. At least that's one article I read, and that his expenses weren't really all that extravagant. Nonetheless, I don't know if that's actually accepted wisdom or if that was just this one article sort of making this argument. But overall, it was a really neat way to play, a really neat game to play. And I managed to get a fully enclosed castle with 4 moats, or 3 moats, which I've never done before. So that was really neat too. That's The Castles of Mad King Ludwig. Well worth a chance to checking it out if you get a chance. Especially since they released this fancy new edition, which I haven't seen myself, but I think the old edition is just fine. And with the fancy new edition available, I wouldn't be surprised to learn that some people are selling their old editions at rock bottom prices. So if you don't care about bling, check out the old one. All right, so that's The Castles of Mad King Ludwig, designed by Ted Alsbach. All right, so the third game I want to talk about today is from Eagle Gryphon Games, and it's designed by Vital Lacerda. That is Weather Machine. Weather Machine is the latest huge box extravaganza of complicated choices and interesting interlocking mechanisms in which you are trying to do a complicated thing by executing complicated ideas in a complicated format and a very particular order. Like the Gallerist and On Mars before it, Weather Machine is a very heavy game. Perhaps among the top 5 heaviest games I've ever played. It's incredibly dense with mechanisms and systems, and in order to understand it or play it well, you have to understand how to make those systems swing back and forth, how to make them connect in the right order. The game involves a variety of different resources that you have to marshal, and a number of different timing considerations that you have to wrangle in order to be successful at scoring points and sort of getting stuff. If this sounds a lot like On Mars, it's because it is. It's very similar to On Mars, very similar to the Gallerist in terms of the kind of thing you're doing. I really enjoyed my play of this game, but I am not sad that I didn't buy it. This is the sort of game I will only get to play occasionally with really committed friends. It's not the sort of game I'll get to play at home. And so I already collect one designer who I never get to play at home. That's Vladimir Suchy. And occasionally another designer who I rarely get to play at home. That would be Martin Wallace. So I don't really need a third designer I would never play at home. Weather Machine is a beautiful game. The production from Eagle Gryphon Games is equally beautiful. It comes with these little metal gears, although I think maybe the game comes with cardboard gears if you didn't pay for the extra metal gears. It comes with screen printed meeples and all sorts of good stuff. About halfway through my play, I found myself saying, this game is too complicated. This is a bridge too far, Vital. And I was feeling overwhelmed. By the end of the game, I felt like I really kind of understood how the systems all interlock together. Now, this was a couple weeks ago. If I had to go back and play the game today, I'm not sure I would remember half of what was there. But ultimately, I felt by the end of the game, I did kind of get it. And if I had been able to play it again the next day, I really would have understood what's going on. I think this game is not quite as good as On Mars for the main reason of the theme does not translate nearly as well. Like on Mars, you are building a space station, you're having these rovers drive around, get stuff, and you're hiring these scientists. Like all of the things that you're doing in the game sort of fit with the way the game presents what's going on. In Weather Machine, everything is a layer more abstracted. Basically, the game has what looks like 3 large icon-filled tables in the middle of the board, and each table interacts with pieces in a little bit different way. And as you play, you're basically trying to manipulate these tables to give you points. And that part felt extremely abstract. It didn't really feel like you're doing any of the things the game says you're doing. Some of the iconography helped, publishing your paper, you get a little book token, but ultimately these things felt pretty abstracted. On top of it, the game has a number of places where there's asymmetry for no good reason, or I would say not enough reason to make it worth doing. Like for example, on those 3 tables, there is an effect that happens when you play a specific kind of thing, and I honestly can't remember what the thing is. But like on one of the tables, I remember it is, there's these 3 tracks above the tables, and the spot where your token is on these tracks results in you getting a bonus when a certain thing happens. But the thing is, on one of the tracks, you get everything that's to the left of the bonus token. On the second track, you get to pick one of the things that's to the left of the bonus track. And on the third track, you get to activate the things right where your token is. So 3 tracks, 3 different ways of scoring those tracks. It felt overly complicated to me, and I guess it's more fun if they work differently, because then you have to think about which goals you want. There's trade-offs to be made. But it's 3 more things you have to carry in your head as you're trying to figure out the systems. And it just becomes pretty overwhelming. So for all those things together, Weather Machine was good. I enjoyed it quite a bit, and Ian O'Toole's art is beautiful. But ultimately, I didn't like it as much as On Mars. I think I liked it more than the Gallerist, because I really did not care for the Gallerist's theme. And I think the theme in On Mars, or the theme in Weather Machine, even abstracted, is more interesting as an idea, even if you're not actually doing anything with it. So that is my thoughts on Weather Machine. So I'm curious, friends, so I'd put Weather Machine in the play if it sounds like the kind of game that's fun to you. I would not recommend buying without playing first. So friends, which of these games have you played? Which ones have you tried? Which ones have you purchased? What did you think of them? What other games have you been playing recently? Head over to Board Game Geek Guild 3269 and let me know there what you think of these games or other games you've been playing recently. If you want to send a message to me directly, you can message me at brendan@rattleboxgames.com or send me a Geekmail message on Board Game Geek. Wombat929 is my username there. Thanks for joining me on my walk today. I hope that your next walk is as pleasant as mine was. Bye-bye.
Brought to you by Rattlebox Games.